It was a crisp Monday morning in a packed courthouse in Atlanta. The air buzzed with quiet murmurs and the weight of pending justice. Among the crowd of attorneys, officers, and defendants, no one seemed to notice the black woman sitting calmly behind the judge's bench, at least not at first. Her black robe rested effortlessly on her shoulders, her hair tied neatly back, and her eyes scanned the courtroom with a calm yet commanding presence. She was Judge Vanessa Cole, one of the youngest and only black female judges to be appointed in the county in over 3 decades. But despite her title, her qualifications, and her undeniable authority, she was about to be reminded that respect is not always given, especially to women who look like her. The courtroom doors swung open as 2 white police officers escorted a handcuffed defendant to the front. The older of the two, Sergeant Matthews, barely looked at Judge Cole as he entered. He whispered something to his partner, both smirking as if walking into a joke they had rehearsed 100 times. Judge Cole's face remained steady, though she caught the exchange. She had seen that look before, dismissive, condescending, calculated. When the bailiff instructed the officers to address the bench, Sergeant Matthews stepped forward, arms crossed, eyes bored. "Where's the judge?" he asked flatly. The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward Judge Cole, who leaned slightly forward, unblinking. Her voice, smooth but firm, echoed through the chamber. "You're speaking to her." A beat passed. Then another. Matthews blinked, visibly stunned, then chuckled under his breath. "No disrespect, ma'am. Just thought you were the clerk or something." His partner snorted behind him. The insult hung in the air, unspoken but heavy. No apology followed. Just a smug look that said, "You don't belong here." Judge Cole said nothing for a moment. The courtroom was still, the tension sharp. She could feel every eye on her, waiting, some with silent support, others with veiled contempt. She had learned long ago not to respond to ignorance with rage. That's what they expected. That's what they wanted. Instead, she let silence do its work, the kind of silence that forces truth to squirm. She shifted her gaze to the defendant, a young black man, no older than 25. His hands trembled slightly in the cuffs, his face bruised. The arrest report claimed resisting, but she'd seen this story before, written on the bodies of sons, brothers, and husbands who never made it past the booking room. She looked again at the officers, then back at the defendant. Her next words cut through the courtroom like steel. "Let the record show that the arresting officer entered this courtroom unaware of who presides over it, and proceeded to question the legitimacy of this court by implying I could not possibly be its judge. This is not just disrespectful, it is dangerous." Sergeant Matthews shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. His partner's face darkened. She continued, her voice rising ever so slightly. "Every time a black professional is questioned, doubted, or mocked in their role, it doesn't just insult them, it undermines the integrity of the entire institution they serve. This courtroom does not exist to validate your assumptions, it exists to uphold justice, and I suggest you remember that." The officers stared blankly, but the mood in the room had changed. Something had cracked, something more profound than tension. It was the sound of power being reclaimed, dignity being asserted in a space not built to welcome it. The hearing began, but Judge Cole couldn't ignore what she had seen in the defendant's eyes. Fear, resignation. A look she had seen too many times in her own family, her own community. A look that said, "They don't see me as human." She leaned forward again. "Mr. Boyd," she said, addressing the defendant, "you are entitled to be heard today, not as a statistic, not as a suspect, but as a citizen of this country. Do you understand?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor." She turned her attention to the file in front of her and began to read aloud. According to the report, Mr. Boyd was apprehended for loitering and acting suspiciously near a corner store. She paused. "Were there any items stolen? Any aggressive behavior?" Sergeant Matthews finally spoke, his tone sharp. He looked like he was casing the place. "We were doing our job." "And what about the injuries on his face?" she asked. "The ones that don't seem to be documented in your arrest report?" Matthews hesitated. He resisted. He got physical. The courtroom remained still, but Judge Cole could feel the storm gathering. She leaned back, eyes locked on Matthews. Resisting. A common word with uncommon consequences. She looked at the young man again. "Mr. Boyd, were you given your rights upon arrest?" "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "Were you searched legally? Did they explain what you were being arrested for?" "No, ma'am." Her voice turned icy. "And did you resist?" "No, ma'am. I just asked why they were grabbing me." Next thing I knew, I was on the ground. Judge Cole closed the file. "Thank you. I've heard enough for now." What happened next wasn't written in any legal manual. It wasn't something they taught in law school. But it was something every black woman in power knows intuitively: how to stand your ground when the world tries to erase the floor beneath your feet. Judge Cole issued an immediate internal inquiry into the officer's conduct. She ordered body cam footage to be submitted within 24 hours and ensured Mr. Boyd would receive legal representation independent of the public defender system, one known to be overworked and under-resourced. And as she finished the session, she addressed the room not as a judge, but as a mirror, reflecting back every assumption made about her and shattering them one word at a time. "This court will never be a sanctuary for ego or bias," she said. "And if the badge you wear gives you power, let this bench remind you that power without accountability is nothing but abuse." As the gavel hit the block, there was no applause. Just silence, respectful, shaken, humbled silence. Even the officers said nothing as they exited, their arrogance deflated, their pride wounded. But the young man in handcuffs, he looked different now. Not free, not yet, but seen. And sometimes, being seen is the beginning of justice. The news of the incident didn't take long to spread. Within hours, clips from the courtroom began circulating on social media. The silence, the looks, the glares, and the judge's unshaken poise were now public knowledge. Some dismissed it as nothing, but for many in the black community, it was a moment that resonated deeply. It reminded them of every time their dignity had been quietly bruised in rooms where they were outnumbered, overlooked, or underestimated. Judge Cole sat alone in her chambers that evening, the events of the day playing over and over in her mind. There was a knock at the door. Her clerk entered, hesitating slightly. "Ma'am, the Chief Justice's office just called. They want to schedule a meeting, virtual, tomorrow morning." She nodded slowly. "Tell them I'll be ready." The next morning, Judge Cole sat in front of a large screen. On it, 3 senior justices from the state's judicial panel appeared. All were white men. Their voices were calm, but their questions were sharp. "Judge Cole, we've reviewed the footage and received complaints from multiple police departments about how you conducted your court." She leaned forward, her face calm but unyielding. "And have you received the full context of the officer's behavior in my courtroom?" "We have," one of them admitted reluctantly. "But it's not about that. It's about decorum. Optics." She smiled faintly. "Decorum. Interesting how it becomes a concern when someone like me asserts authority." The silence on the call was thick. "Gentlemen," she said firmly, "let me be clear. Silence has never protected us. Not in courtrooms, not in classrooms, not in churches, not in the streets. If maintaining decorum means accepting disrespect, then I choose justice instead." That clip, too, leaked. And this time, it went viral not just across black communities, but nationwide. Over the next week, something unusual happened. Judge Cole began receiving letters, not from officials, but from ordinary people. From young black law students. From mothers who said their daughters saw her and felt proud. From retired judges who quietly admitted they'd once let similar moments pass in silence. One evening, she visited a community center in the south side of the city. It was an unscheduled visit. When she entered, people paused. Some clapped. Some simply nodded in solemn respect. Among the crowd was a young girl, maybe 12 years old, clutching a small notebook. She approached Judge Cole, timid but wide-eyed. "Are you really a judge?" she asked. Cole knelt down, leveling her gaze. "Yes, and maybe one day you will be too." The girl beamed. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs at the police department opened a quiet review of the officers involved. Their behavior, on and off record, was now being scrutinized. One was reassigned. The other received a formal reprimand. It wasn't justice in full, but it was movement. Back in Judge Cole's courtroom, something shifted. The next time she entered, the room rose, not just in protocol, but in respect. The very officers who once slouched now stood tall. The lawyers spoke with clearer deference. Even the silence felt different, less oppressive, more reverent. That day, she called up a young defendant. It was Mr. Boyd, the same man from earlier. He looked different, not just in clothing, but in spirit. There was something firmer in his stance, something clearer in his eyes. He handed down her ruling, fair but firm. As he prepared to leave, he paused and turned to her. "Judge Cole, I never thought people like me could stand up here and feel seen. Now I think maybe I could be you one day." She didn't smile, not outwardly, but something in her eyes softened. That night, after court was done and the halls were quiet again, she drove to an old cemetery on the edge of town. There, under a tall oak tree, was her father's grave, a former teacher. The man who taught her to speak with dignity even when voices tried to drown hers. She laid flowers down and whispered, "They tried to make me small today, but I remembered your voice." As the sun dipped low, she returned to her courtroom one last time that evening. No jury, no audience, no cameras, just her. Standing in the middle of that quiet, powerful space, she looked around and let the silence wrap around her, not as a weapon, but as a shield. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence was the answer.